Movies suck now. Anyone who disagrees is wrong. You're not imagining things. Movies coming out of Hollywood now have really gone down the drain. And it's definitely not because you're out of touch. It's because the world's greatest art form has been declining ever since Louis Le Prince shot the first film over 150 years ago, way back in 1888. The only thing we need to ask now is whether the decline was steady or sudden. Some say we haven't even seen how bad things can get. Others think films stopped being good the moment they became a money-making machine. Then again, there are those that say there's never been a better time to be an audience or a filmmaker. So who's right and who's wrong? Well, today we're going to diagnose the downfall once and for all to find out who is responsible for the death of the movies. I promise, the final reason is going to split this audience. Reason number 1. Not so special effects. We all love explosions. Unfortunately, for everything good special effects have done, there's been a terrible cost. During the silent movie era, the likes of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton had to be daring both physically and mentally. Trick photography and false sets required real out-of-the-box thinking because one false move could be fatal, or worse, cost a lot of money. They had skin in the game, and you feel it viscerally even if deep down you know some smoke and mirrors is at play. Knowledge acquired fed into other disciplines, like camera work and set designs, to create awe-inspiring moving pictures where you didn't know how they did it. By the time Metropolis came along, audiences were treated to the most magnificent blending of handicraft and cinematic wizardry the world had ever known. Now, the race was on to top it. Next came the remarkable claymation effects of Ray Harryhausen. His work is celebrated with dedicated sections in film libraries despite never having directed any of the movies himself. Soon, makeup gave way to incredible prosthetics. Puppetry led to animatronics. Even matte paintings paved the way for blue screen. That's right. What we know today as green screen technology used to be blue. But then something happened. Special effects stopped being viewed as a way to make things better, and instead became viewed as a way to make things cheaper. Instead of walking onto a film set to see how craftsmanship intersected with artistry, you saw green screen everywhere. Special effects became more lifelike, yet felt less real. Is seeing Spider-Man fall through Doctor Strange multiverse truly as jaw-dropping as seeing the T-1000 step through those iron bars? Do you really think Groot looks more believable than the foot of the T-Rex from Jurassic Park? So, who's to blame for taking the special out of special effects? For my money, there are two prime suspects. The first is Peter Jackson. The New Zealand filmmaker cut his teeth with crazy prosthetics and gory effects, so it's not like he didn't know the satisfaction of handicraft. But when it came to The Lord of the Rings, his budget didn't need to hire helicopters for dazzling aerial shots of armies. Instead, CGI had advanced so much he could composite more soldiers than you could ever imagine. Jackson proved you could do it better, faster, and cheaper. Now, aerial shots aren't impressive. The helicopter used for the opening scene of The Shining used to be dazzling, but now you can see TikToks with drone footage. Then there's culprit number 2, George Lucas. Hands down, the original Star Wars trilogy probably did more for special effects than any other film. Its mix of miniatures, matte paintings, and cutting-edge computer technology showed that special effects are a storytelling tool. But that legacy came crashing down with Jar Jar Binks. He was the world's first motion-captured character. Every time you see Spider-Man swinging in a Marvel movie or Gollum wrestling with a hobbit, remember that it wouldn't have happened without Jar Jar. He was patient zero. That Gungan died for our CGI sins. But now, 3D characters are so fully realized we don't even need costumes, or makeup, or even actors. Even virtual sets are becoming the norm. So yes, green screen and motion capture has created detailed, beautiful shots. But are you really on the edge of your seat when you watch a CGI fight in a movie? Do you really struggle to know when the filmmakers cut from the real actor to the computer version? Pandora may look great, but it doesn't feel as alien or real as Luke Skywalker staring up at two suns setting over the dunes of Tatooine. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So it's time to learn how history works as we solve how movies got to be so bad. We now turn your attention away from our scheduled programming to bring you a message from our sponsor, Compounded Daily. Friends, each week there's a bundle of riveting tales that regrettably can't make their debut here, all due to the whims of the YouTube algorithm. But fret not, By enlisting in my brand new and absolutely free email newsletter, you'll be in the know with stories like the intriguing inception of a VC fund by our allies at NATO. This newsletter, dear viewers, will traverse the exciting worlds of finance, business, and economics, ensuring you're always in the loop. If the topics discussed here pique your interest, then rest assured, you'll find the newsletter a delightful read. It's not only enjoyable, but also enlightening, offering you fresh insights from yours truly, a seasoned veteran in the investment banking world. Becoming a part of our newsletter family is as simple as 1, 2, 3, folks. Simply use the link provided in the description, make your way to compoundeddaily.com, and then sign up with the email you use the most.
Reason number 2. Actors don't know how to act. Show of hands if you recently struggled to understand what a character is saying. I watched Oppenheimer in the front row of an IMAX cinema and still had no idea what was being said. The good news is we're not going deaf. The bad news is it isn't the fault of sound technicians. The problem is actors. Back at the start of the last century, filmmakers were still figuring out how film acting was different to theater acting. Stagecraft requires you to be outwardly expressive so that the guys at the back of the room know what's going on. Their ticket sales were paying for your supper, don't forget. But being able to use a camera for a close-up meant performers needed to act small, not bigger. Being able to decide which tiny details the audience saw was revolutionary. It was logical that a naturalistic approach would emerge, especially when radio mics meant actors didn't have to amplify their voices. Marlon Brando was a mumbler by his time's standards, yet audiences were mesmerized by his more realistic depiction of behavior. Subtle body movements conveyed deeper characterization. Emotions were rawer. Behaviors seemed more believable. It was a much-needed palate cleanser to the stale robotics of the vaudeville tradition. Unfortunately, the popularizing of a naturalistic approach meant solid theater techniques have been lost. For example, enunciation. Who cares about being able to speak clearly when mumbling is cool? Add that to the emergence of method acting, and you get an entire generation of performers who spend more time wondering how a fictional character feels than learning to use their body and voice. Performers went from learning a disciplined craft to being a mysterious artist burdened with a natural talent. This made us want to know more about them. And the less we knew, the more we wanted to know. Ironically, the more we knew, the less we cared. If video killed the radio star, then social media killed the movie star. Seeing the insipid daily lives of A-listers didn't make them as down-to-earth as their PR teams hoped. Instead, it eroded their mystique. Watching Reese Witherspoon make ice cream with real snow was bizarre, but for many, the imagined sing-along was a turning point in how audiences perceived actors. On the flip side, social media stars became famous precisely because of their insipid daily lives. As markets leveraged the power of the nobody, acting took a bigger hit. Now, the way to become an actor isn't to hone a craft or make work. It's to get enough followers. Game of Thrones actress Sophie Turner admits she beat out competition for big roles because she has more social media followers. Even TikToker Addison Rae has a Netflix acting credit under her belt. Given how influencers ruin everything they touch, it's only a matter of time until acting is done for. But maybe that's what we deserve. Reason number 3. Audiences have gotten worse. It's easy to pretend we have no influence over what gets made when we see Hollywood making obvious mistakes. Can our movie ticket really influence a studio's decision when it was their idea to make a female reboot of Ghostbusters that no one asked for? We've already seen Warner Bros. Can Batgirl to save money. Now they've used Coyote vs. Acme as a tax write-off despite it scoring very well with test audiences. Why do they need us to decide what to make? Once you realize how popular reaction content is, it becomes easier to comprehend the feedback loop between media creation and consumption. Anyone who posted a video of an audience screaming at Tobey Maguire's appearance in the latest Marvel Spider-Man was effectively doing Disney's marketing, for free. But we can't blame Zoomers for lowering the standards when the problem started with home video. Once VHS decisively beat out Betamax as the definitive home format, movies got a brand new consumer market, especially when the likes of Blockbuster sprung to help movie lovers access their favorite movies or discover new releases. Studios could make a buck off straight-to-video releases. Indies had a new way to reach more viewers. Films could make money twice. As Matt Damon explained during his appearance on Hot Ones, the DVD market helped producers earn money back if their film wasn't so hot at the theaters. Studios could afford to sometimes be adventurous. During the 80s and 90s, and even into the start of the 2000s, the tentpole films were all original ideas. But as this new era of films was growing, and TV was gaining speed with the likes of HBO, us audiences got greedy.
We became fickler over what we watched or rented. The number crunchers realized that they could predict what an audience might watch rather than put all their eggs in one basket. This thinking went into overdrive when the internet became the next big thing. Piracy was eating up profit margins, and the industry couldn't figure out how to incorporate broadband into their business model. Music, by comparison, did better at utilizing the internet, and was prepared to pivot more towards live performance and merchandise as the main money spinner. The best studios could do was rely on pre-existing IPs, adaptations, remix, reboots, prequels, and sequels. By the time Netflix overhauled the routes to exhibition, audiences were already spending more on old ideas than new scripts. Since the fateful day that Blockbuster turned down Netflix's offer to sell themselves, the number crunching became AI-driven algorithms. Why take a risk on something you might not like when studios have Minority Report levels of tools to know what you will watch? Netflix even cuts up their trailers into dozens of versions so they know which one will work with your digital footprint. That's why it's not possible to discover something on a streaming platform. The days of going into a video shop and taking the chance on some strange title you've never heard of are over. It gets worse. Streaming companies know their screen isn't the primary one we're using. Be honest, when's the last time you sat through something without looking at your phone? Over a third of streaming users prefer to consume content on a tiny phone screen, thereby eroding the incentive for filmmakers to be, cinematic. Studios are now making titles designed to be repackaged into content or designed to be background noise. So, what right do we have to complain that movies are worse when filmmakers are just giving us what we want? But maybe we're being too hard on ourselves. Surely the industry is just doing what it's always done, right? Reason number 4. It was never about the art. Popcorn is how we know movies have always put money before art. Ask yourself, why do you eat popcorn in the movies when it's so noisy? There's not a single person watching this video right now who hasn't had their date night ruined by some bozo rummaging into the bottom of his popcorn bucket. It's because the heated maze was first sold at carnivals where movies first started gaining widespread public interest. Before that, the movie camera was an obscure tech demo which only intrigued the most diehard photography nerd. These wannabe world changers did their best to refine technology in hopes of finding a common use for the average man. However, that milestone belongs to the Lumiere brothers. With a surname resembling the word illumination, it's obvious their fate was to be intertwined with the history of celluloid. Their destiny? Monetizing movies. They inched ahead of other innovators to become the first to charge a paying audience for a screening. Their landmark piece depicted workers leaving their factory. Thrilling stuff, I know. However, history more fondly remembers their late exhibition of a train pulling into a station. Audiences mistook the approaching locomotive as the real thing and ran from their seats in terror. Fortunately, us modern folk aren't so easily fooled by what we see. Without movie theaters, the only way to earn money from it was at carnivals. During the 1900s, dedicated booths were erected to capitalize on this growing novelty. It cost a nickel to access one of these Odeons, the Roman and Greek word for a place to view entertainment, which is how we got the word Nickelodeon. This means those early documentary newsreels and moving images of musicians playing in silence tie the medium to a commercial enterprise. Surely this means filmmakers can never sell out, because film never started as an artistic experiment to begin with. Even money forced the creation of Hollywood. Thomas Edison hounded independent filmmakers for using his kinetoscope without paying him a cut. In the end, the budding movie moguls grew so sick of being sued that they fled across the continent until they reached California. Here, the bright sun made it easier to shoot outdoors, and Edison's lawyers had no jurisdiction. Not that it mattered. By the time the studio system was up and running, they were as money-hungry as the inventor's legal team. Flash forward to the end of the 20th century, and technology improved so much that filmmaking was democratized thanks to home video and consumer-friendly editing software. Independent movies like Clerks and movements like Dogma 95 showed that you didn't need flashy cameras to tell big-screen stories. Even the Blair Witch Project proved how the aesthetics of amateur filmmaking could create box office successes. Heck, it was so successful that an entire genre was born. Unfortunately, this rejuvenation was just another blip on the radar. Smartphones killed off the found footage genre, and the indie style was commodified into another genre. Studios might say they have an independent wing, but their budgets are anything but. So the next time you think movies are bad now just because the studios only care about money, just remember why you're eating popcorn in the first place. But this is nothing compared to the final reasons movies suck. If you've been paying attention, you know what I'm about to say. Reason number 5. Politics. Marlon Brando's Oscar refusal did more than highlight Hollywood's unfair treatment of Native Americans. It set a precedent for how movies integrate politics. Now, I'm not saying politics had no place in cinema until Brando was nominated for his performance in The Godfather, nor am I saying you can't revisit older movies with a critical eye. Even the most jaded film historian has to admit as much as D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation was a landmark moment for technical achievement and narrative innovations. It was also, well, pro-KKK and extremely racist. And I'm not even saying that no classic movie was ever political. Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator made light of Hitler's rise to power with a pro-unity monologue at the climax. The Grapes of Wrath detailed the plights of the Depression, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington challenged political corruption right when America was gearing up to join the fight against Nazi Germany. Yet, I think it's fair to say that politics has become an integral part of cinema's machine, especially when it comes to marketing. That's one thing pro and anti-woke can all agree on. So, what happened? To simplify it, let's just say that the death of the American New Wave made everyone nervous. Basically, the new Hollywood movement started in the 60s when the old studio system just couldn't figure out what the kids wanted. So, they let the kids make their stuff. Directors like Spielberg, Scorsese, Lucas, and Coppola honed their skills because studios gave them a chance to be artists. This approach wasn't unique to the USA. More or less, every country's new wave comes about when risk-takers lead the charge. Back then, audiences were eager for challenging work, and more prepared to have real discussions, in person with real people, not over Twitter with strangers. But even though The Godfather proved to studios that the kids could make cool stuff, there were compounding examples of kids messing things up for everyone else. Shortly after Brando stuck his middle finger up at the Academy, the American New Wave darling Michael Cimino tanked an entire studio with his follow-up to The Deer Hunter. Heaven's Gate was such a catastrophe that it killed off United Artists, one of the original Hollywood studios whose founders included Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith. In fact, Cimino had once asked the street set to be built, but was unhappy that the sides were 6 inches too far apart. When the set designer suggested they move one side 6 inches closer, Cimino refused and demanded they tear down everything and then rebuild it again. But this time, 6 inches closer. United Artists was saved with a buyout by MGM. But by then, it had become clear to the studios they needed to take back control, especially since the release of Star Wars in jars a few years prior proved that you could have a tentpole film on your project slate. When merchandising made distribution the real moneymaker, studios shut down the auteur projects once and for all. Risk-taking was out. Safe bets were in. But worse than that, some of the studio's executives used to be kids of the new wave. Why take a risk letting a kid call the shots when you used to be a kid? You know what the kids want, right? And what do the kids want? Politics. Trending topics and consensus became a factor into how to make, sell, and market movies. Social media just kicked this into overdrive. Now, the Oscars have become an expected place to hear an actor deliver a rehearsed speech about a cause. Even if you agree with a particular campaign, you have to admit it's diluted the power of taking a political stance on the world stage. Studios are even writing clauses into actors' contracts to have influence about what they say and how they say it. Press junkets featured the principal cast and crew regurgitated PR-approved talking points about how important their film is. Now it's trickled down. Audiences talk about how important they are being by buying a movie ticket or merch. Watching the wrong movie or not watching the right movie could mean social death, and that's before social media finds out about your opinion of a movie. Speaking of which, what's your opinion? Do you think movies are about to get worse, or do you think that we're on the verge of a renaissance? Now, I hate to say that money has destroyed all good things, but it's also kind of true when it comes to the news. Go watch our video on the 200-year downfall of journalism. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how history works.